The Spinoff Podcast Network.
K-pop to me means more than just listening to music. It's learning to be myself.
The Spinoff's new documentary, K-Pollies, follows 3 Pacific youth obsessed with K-pop. In a one-off documentary, see what they've found in Korean pop culture and how they bridge it with their own.
When you start dressing, looking different, everyone side-eyes you. But in K-pop, they're just like, no, like celebrate yourself.
Watch K-Pollies today at thespinoff.co.nz/videos. Made with the support of New Zealand On Air. You're listening to Business is Boring, a podcast that reckons it's anything but. Business is Boring is brought to you by SparkLab, offering inspiration and practical advice to help businesses find their edge. To hear more about SparkLab, including details about the latest events, workshops, and business tools, visit sparklab.co.nz. And now, here's your host, Simon Pound.
You're listening to Business is Boring, a podcast that reckons it's anything but. Business is Boring is made by the Spinoff with help from Callaghan Innovation, New Zealand's innovation agency. Here's your host, Simon Pound.
When refugees come to New Zealand, they find a lot of help from religious groups to get started with housing and public services, with volunteers helping at every step. One of those volunteers, though, working with the Red Cross, noticed that employment was something that was hard for refugees to get. After 2 years, 40% aren't in work. So to try to change this volunteer looked around for a business that might use their skills and decided to leave a law career at one of the top law firms to set up a company making underwear here in Wellington with refugee workers. Elisha Watson didn't have a background in clothing, and some of her workers still needed a lot of training. It was a hard first year, with Elisha sharing highs and lows through the crowdfunding, media and blogs. The company is called Nisa, Arabic for woman, and now Nisa has just opened its first store in Wellington, where shoppers will be able to see production going on around them with an open workroom. To talk the idea, the journey, and what's next, Elisha joins us now by phone from Wellington. Kia ora, good morning.
Hi Simon, good morning.
Hey, so tell me a little bit about how you came to set up Nisa.
As you mentioned, I was working as a lawyer, and I wanted to kind of give back in my spare time, so I was volunteering at community law, and then also with the Red Cross to help resettle recently arrived refugee families. And I can very much recommend it to anyone in New Zealand who's wanting to find a really practical way to help vulnerable people in the community. It was quite, I guess, a transformative experience because you're placed with a family and you get to see, exactly what they're up against, their like hopes and dreams, and also their, all of the troubles and struggles they have trying to set up a life in New Zealand. So yeah, that's kind of how I got involved with the refugee community, and then also, I guess, the breeding ground for my kind of, social enterprise ideas, I guess.
How did you come to be involved with the Red Cross in the first place?
They, I guess just how anyone would. So they run programs for to train up people to help resettle former refugees. So a team is placed with a family. So just like anyone else would, I kind of looked it up online. I kind of knew a little bit about the program just through the media, and there was a lot of coverage at the time that I started volunteering, because it was when that photo came out of that little boy who'd been washed up on the beach. I can't remember exactly where his body was found, but I think he was a little Syrian boy. And that I remember the Red Cross saying that after that photo came out, they were just swamped with applications for volunteers, because it really, I guess, galvanized people around this issue and, prompted people to want to help.
And what did you find from getting involved with these families? Like, I often think, as having small kids and having to navigate the system, I often think sometimes, boy, if I wasn't lucky enough to be a good advocate, we might not always get what we were hoping to, the help we were always hoping to get.
Yeah, well, it's funny you mentioned children because a lot of the time, especially if the parents don't speak great English, having children in the family is lovely because you can really, usually, if someone likes your kids and is playing with them, you'll like them. So even if you can't really communicate that much, like children are a great thing to bond over and, create a real sense of playfulness within a family. And so I was really lucky that the families I were looking after were really big families. And so there's always lots to do and lots to laugh about and stuff like that. But yeah, it also meant that because there are quite a few children, like, someone getting sick was like a really big deal and they're not sure how seriously to take it. And even a trip to hospital or anything like that is just so hard. Basically because one of the families I looked after, they couldn't even, I'm pretty sure people would just pronounce their names incorrectly. But for example, how people would pronounce their names, they wouldn't recognize. So if a doctor comes into a waiting room and says their name, they wouldn't respond to it. And so you can just imagine if they were there in a hospital waiting room alone, what an absolute disaster that would be because they couldn't even be summoned anywhere. So yeah, it's definitely really, they need a lot of support, especially if they have basically no English. And in fact, one of the families I looked after, when one of the family members arrived, she was about 8 months pregnant. So we had a birth immediately after she arrived to kind of think about and worry about.
And that's even in the parts of the system that are, dedicated to helping people. So I imagine that once you get into other parts of society, helping these people becomes exponentially harder, where people aren't set up to try and accommodate people, like business and work.
Yeah, so that's a really good point. So if you go to the GP, there are systems set up like Language Line, for example. So there are ways for people to access translating services to help them with their fundamental needs. But I guess it's a controversial point, but internationally, work isn't necessarily recognized as a human right or a need. It's almost seen as, I guess, sometimes a little bit of a luxury. Like, oh yeah, it'd be if you can manage it, good for you. If you can't, too bad. And so not enough support is given to people who really have stuff to give but need the support to kind of make it over the finish line and secure that job and be an awesome employee into the future.
And also to feel kind of engaged and part of a society. You want to be you want to be meeting people and building networks and using your skills and kind of integrating fully into any kind of community. And so I imagine
Absolutely.
that a lot of these people are really keen to work. We're all conditioned from kind of preschool that if we're not busy between 9 and 3, we're bad people. And finding it hard. And so there was this something that you came up against, like seeing these people trying to get work and just not being able to navigate it.
Oh, absolutely. Actually, the funny thing is that I kind of approached this with all of my own cultural preconceptions as, I guess, a Western educated woman, and a lot of and that's been challenged often. And now I've got quite a, more of a nuanced idea than maybe when I went into it. So, one thing is that quite a few of my employees have never worked before in their life because they are mothers. So, they would have gotten married when they were in their early teens or mid-teens and had children straight away. And they'd never, ever planned to work, basically, because in their home countries, that would, that's not really what you do. Your husband works and you stay at home and raise the family. And then they arrive in New Zealand, and suddenly their husband can't find work. And so there's this whole kind of upheaval within the family because it's like, what do you do? We need money. Someone needs to find work, and often it's the woman who can find a job or, either like cooking or cleaning or whatever. And so it's a really interesting and challenging space, I think, for a lot of them, because that's, it's not like they've been dreaming it wasn't part of their plan, I guess is a way to say it, but it's amazing to be part of that, because what you see is the joys and pleasures and meaning that work can bring, even when it wasn't on the cards for you.
And I imagine that the men also probably expecting to be able to work and not being able to, that must put some interesting dynamics on the world when the woman who hadn't had a public life suddenly have a public life and the men don't.
Totally. I think that's the thing that I love the most about NISA and our workshop, is that it brings women who wouldn't necessarily have that many relationships outside of their family into contact with a whole nother world of people, and other women from all over the world in a business context outside of their family life. It's just it's so awesome to be able to give someone a whole other world. And yeah, I'm just so stoked to do that, because it means just greater independence for them. They can catch a bus by themselves to work. They can communicate with strangers. There's so many things that they can do because they're used to doing that every single day at work.
And economic independence, and kids growing up seeing mum navigating the world well. All of those things are so important.
Absolutely, yeah. So that's what I'm passionate
resettling
about.
Families. For people coming fresh to a culture, and so I mean those are some amazing kind of challenges to have. How did you land on deciding to do kind of ethical underwear as the business?
Yeah, so I get it's a bit of a funny one, eh? So I guess there are so many answers to that question, and I'm really, really glad we went down that path. So the easiest thing to say is basically that we have a really strange customer profile. So we have equal spends from people from 20 years old to 60 years old. So and not many businesses can claim that level of demographic flatness. And it's basically because everyone needs underwear. And when you're creating a social enterprise, I knew from the very beginning that we'd be really, in some ways, just preaching to the converted. We had to, we'd have a small group of society that was really passionate about what we were trying to do. And we needed to sell something to every single one of those people that wanted to help us out. We couldn't really be a niche product that was really style specific. We wanted to be style inclusive. And so to go down the generic kind of fashion route, I didn't think it was a great idea, because, style is so distinct and unique, and what's beautiful to one person is hideous to another. And so I thought, underwear is a really good basic, and women wear cotton underwear most of the time. And I saw a real gap in that market, because I know, when you go to underwear stores as a woman, 3/4 of the store is this crazy lacy underwear, and very unloved at the very back is the kind of boring cotton section. And I just thought that could do with a bit of a shake up. So yeah, there are many, many reasons. And another one, I guess, is just that I didn't really want to be part of the culture of waste that was often connected with fashion, because I love secondhand clothing. So I thought, not many people are willing to buy underwear secondhand, so I couldn't buy conscious, because probably rest of it easier.
And I imagine it's also really universal as well. It doesn't matter if you have a burqa or a lacy little black dress or something, you're still wearing underwear underneath. So it's a very universal thing, isn't it?
Exactly, and that's why it's so at Christmas time, it was amazing, because I was astounded, the business just shot through the roof, because so many people were buying it for their friends and family. It was so exciting. But I'm also really glad that we got into that kind of gifting space as well, because it's, it's so lovely to get someone something with a story behind it that you can tell them about and share with them.
And it's a great story, but also underwear, especially cotton underwear, is ludicrously inexpensive if you're buying it from a big retailer. And so what does it take to set up an ethical organic cotton underwear business with kind of some workers who are experienced sewers and some who had to learn, and a first-time CEO who didn't have a clothing industry background?
Yeah. Oh, there's a lot to unpack there. I guess, my own inexperience is both a blessing and a curse. So I guess I did what, if you knew even how, like, if you had any experience, you probably wouldn't have done it. So I guess in some ways it's great because it gives you the naivety to be like, oh yeah, that'll be easy. And then you just kind of commit and then you're like, oh dear. And so that's lovely. But also I guess I think I could do, for the first few months that I opened the business, I had taught myself how to use industrial sewing machines, and I was like, I'm a lawyer. I learned how to sew 2 years ago, or even a year ago, before starting the business. I was like, oh, if I can do it, anyone can do it. And it turns out that that's not necessarily true. So number one, I was quite a terrible teacher, and like basically, I don't think that wasn't a great decision to not bring on outside expertise. And then secondly, I think my assumptions, because I had taught myself to sew and I found it like not that challenging, I guess I had there are actually several personality traits associated with sewing that you can't really train for. And the biggest one is attention to detail. So there are certain things that while it's easy to sew, some people will never, ever be able to actually see what they need to see.
I might just challenge you there, Elisha, it being easy to sew as well, because I wonder if sewing's just one of these things like nursing or elderly care that because it's been a mainly female workforce, it's been just dismissed by society as kind of easy or menial. When in fact, sewing's three-dimensional maths. You need to have you need to have a pattern and the differing kind of the differing shapes in your head moving at once. You need attention to detail. It's hard work. It's physical. It's long hours. It's not an easy. I mean, you may have had an aptitude for it, but I don't know if it's actually easy.
No, okay, I'll correct myself. It's easy to sew. It's hard to sew well. Yeah, maybe that's a better way to say it.
Yeah.
Because anyone can pick up a piece of fabric and shove it through a machine. But this might be getting a bit technical. But our tolerance for so basically in industry, usually you'd have about a centimeter tolerance for seams, which means that you don't have to line things up perfectly. You can kind of fudge it a little bit. So our tolerance is usually around 2 millimeters for matching up seams, because when you've got underwear, if you imagine you're sewing a section of fabric that's, let's say, 6 centimeters, if you're a centimeter out, it's going to be very, very wrong. Yeah. So our tolerances are so small, which greatly increases the skill required to actually sew everything. So one of the things I decided to do after we had our crowdfunding campaign, and we raised quite a lot of money off that.
Yeah, tell me about that. Tell me about the crowdfunding campaign. Sorry.
Just bouncing around. We decided to do a crowdfunding campaign at the very beginning, just when we set up the workshop. And I decided to kind of set up the workshop first and then crowdfund second, because I knew that it's really hard to raise money for a plan. And it's relatively easy if you have something that's currently in operation that you're trying to fund for. So I was like, first I'll set up the workshop, I'll get everyone on board, we'll start training, and then I'll see if this crowdfunding thing can work for us. So we're on the front page of the Dominion Post on the very first day that the crowdfunding campaign launched. And I made all these kind of prizes that were maybe $1,000 or $2,000. Or rewards, I should say. And I kind of made them up because I was like, no one will, just give us $1,000 to help us design a collection, or things that are essentially kind of, fluffy rewards that don't really mean a lot, And they were the first things to sell. I was just like, help us name a pair of underwear, things like that. I was like, what? And they all like sold out basically immediately. And we reached our goal of $10,000 in 3 days, and then doubled it by the end of the month. And that was like that kind of changed everything, because I had a chapter of my story that I often forget is that I'd quit my full-time job as a lawyer, and actually found part-time work as a lawyer elsewhere while the company, and my idea was that I'd need a bit of time to get the social enterprise off the ground, and obviously I knew I couldn't pay myself from it. So the day I started the job was basically the day that we launched the part-time job was the day we launched the crowdfunding campaign. And I just decided, I was like, I need to quit this part-time work. I need to do NISA full-time. And so I quit after working there for about 3 days. And it was because I just felt like that was very embarrassing, highly embarrassing. But I knew that I had been talking to someone at the time, and they had advised me that, well, I just like the idea of failing fast. So the idea is that your success or failure, it's basically you can accelerate the growth or decline of your business by just throwing everything at it. So if it's not going to work, you can discard that really slowly over a long period of time, or you can basically bring that pain forward by just giving a lot of money and a lot of time to it and seeing how it goes. And I quite liked that idea. I liked just knowing, giving it my all, and just seeing if it would work in 6 months rather than in 2 years. So that's kind of why I made that decision. And quit my job, devoted myself full time to NISA, and then I guess the rest is history.
And that first amount of money, $20,000, it doesn't sound like a lot to set up a workroom, employ 3 or 4 people full time, buy machinery, buy fabric ahead of time in order to be able to then, have stock sitting there to sell, to pay the rent on a store, to develop a website, to do some marketing. It sounds to me like that $20,000 would run out in a couple of weeks.
Well, that's definitely true now. So when we started, we had all of our employees were working part-time, and now their hours have increased quite a bit. So that was helpful. But generally, like what I've learned, it's crazy how when you don't have much money in business, you get really good at making every single penny count. I talk to people about how much it costs them to do a photo shoot, and people sometimes set aside $5,000 to $10,000. And I think to myself, I can get that done for $400. It's just about saying, what do we have and what can we do with this, and how can I bring a vision to life within a really confined budget. And because of our story and what we're trying to achieve, the bigger point is that people will just bend over backwards for us and help us in ways that we could never have imagined. We've had an amazing photographer, Virginia Woods Jack, who's, really worked for us for so little money. And there are so many people just like her who, will work at much less than their normal hourly rate just to help us get on our way. And so that's how you make $20,000 last for a long, long time. And, but the main thing I decided to do with that money actually was take on a production manager. So and it's the best decision I think I've made actually from the very beginning. Because I found a lovely employee who'd been in the industry for 20 years. She's a Kiwi, and she has worked in a factory. She had a first factory job when she was 16, and now has her own small business that she works in a few days a week. And she just professionalized the entire operation, trains everyone, manages all the production systems, does our product development. And it's just that level of expertise that has allowed us to absolutely thrive and make an amazing product.
And when you were getting started, leaving, you're working for one of the top law firms in the country, and in an area of law that's really highly kind of competed for in litigation, and that's a super prestigious place to be. And did people kind of say that you were you were bananas to be setting out to try and do something that was quite unproven with quite a few elements that were difficult? Because you had said you got quite good support, but did anyone kind of take you aside and say, have you thought this through?
Yeah, no, they didn't. But I think it's because that would be like a bit of a downer, no, because the assumption behind that is like, I don't think it's going to work, and I want you to realize that too. And yeah, but I was actually very, very worried about quitting my job because I was a little bit embarrassed. Sorry, this is my full-time job. Because, I thought to myself, law is a really conservative profession. People are just going to think that I'm basically batshit insane, and that kind of give you the, good luck with the eyebrows raised and like, we'll see you back here in a year. That kind of look. And I was really worried about that, but I was so delighted because exactly the opposite was true. So I was really nervous about these kind of like, strange looks and like, what a dreamer kind of, feelings. But people, would come up to me in the corridor that I'd, spoken to maybe once or twice since I started there, and, would be like, oh, I heard about what you're going to do, and I think it's amazing. You're so brave, and being genuinely supportive. And I thought, man, if this, if lawyers think I can do it, means maybe I've got a shot.
That's so cool. So you mentioned the production manager as a real turning point for the business. How about some of the other kind of moments like the media support or the pop-ups where you saw that maybe there was a wider community ready to be interested in this? Ooh, dun dun dun. Sorry, Elisha, we've just lost you there. Hello.
Sorry,
oh,
I just pressed mute on my.
That's cool.
I've got a little fat cheek, and I pressed mute with it with my cheek by accident.
No. So I'll just say, other people interested in supporting this?
Yeah. So the media's been crucial for us. So every time we're in the newspaper or a magazine, or especially television, so we've been covered on both Seven Sharp and The Project. It is phenomenal. So before we started our pop-up, we were in a really tight spot financially. And at that time, The Project was filming a little clip about us, and the interviewer was like, "Oh, what would be your advice to other entrepreneurs?" And I was like, "Don't do it." And they were like, "You have to be a bit more positive than that." And I was just feeling so low. And then this was like filming in, and the story was vaguely about the fact that we're having a pop-up a few days later in line with World Refugee Day. And so I set up the pop-up, and I was just thinking, oh God, we're gonna have to shut up soon. Well, shut up shop. Things are not going very well right now. And we were on the news. And that night the pop-up opened the next day, and within 4 days, I think we'd sold, basically all of our stock, which I think was about 20 or 30 grand worth. And so it was just the most phenomenal response. And, getting people emailing us just saying how much they loved the product and how inspired they were. And then other businesses reaching out to us as well saying, oh, we own, a billboard company, or we own a poster company. Can we do a free campaign for you? All of these people really hoping that we're going to make it and supporting us to get there. That was a huge turning point, and just showed me that it was possible, like the business model was possible. But yeah, there have been so many other turning points along the way, and a lot of it has coincided with media coverage we've had. So yeah, definitely, like people say, traditional media is dead, and I would definitely beg to differ in my experience anyway.
You've been really open, like you mentioned there, Elisha, about the we're down to things were very hard cash flow wise, and then talk about some of the figures of the sales and stuff. And I think that's been really interesting, having watched the journey from the sidelines. I love it when business owners are honest and open about those peaks and troughs. And I also saw you mention somewhere that because you came from what you'd called a relatively privileged position and had family to support you and had a good career and had some savings and had a partner to support you, you'd been able to get through those periods, but that other people might not have.
Absolutely.
What could be done to help more people be able to start businesses that have a social good purpose, not just a money-making purpose, when it's so hard for someone of your means and experience and capabilities? How could more people who weren't so equipped be able to do it?
That's really hard, because you can't just magically make cash appear. If only that was possible. And so, family and friends have been really helpful at like providing us with cash to get through like big purchase orders we've had to make, or, big expenses we've had that we can then pay back later. And I guess you can get that same thing from the bank, but like the amazing thing about having your family and friends involved is that you don't have that, those interest repayments. And then also one thing that I feel strongly about is that I've got so much, existing stress and pressure to keep things going and to build the business. I didn't want the idea that I'd then be like chased by the bank is like too much for me. So I don't really want to go down that route. I want to be free and, feel proud of what I've done, but not in any way shackled by it. And so I think that's what this privilege has given me, which is the support of friends and family. So if I did want to step away, I could. And I think this, if you didn't have that, you just end up basically more trapped, because you're forced to go to the bank or get basically capital from other places, which come with certain hooks that you might not necessarily like. And so, it's a really hard one, because, capital is just the lifeblood of business, and basically you need capital far in advance of sales to really make anything work. Yeah. So, it's one of those things where you can't rely on existing demand to spur growth of the business. You actually have to invest, and that money has to come from somewhere.
Yeah, especially if you're doing the work of building a workforce and a factory. You can't even just contract out and wait a while to pay them, as so many kind of fashion businesses do. And fashion's such a bung model as well, and that, you end up operating a bank for all of your customers because they take ages to pay you. You incurred the cost such a long time ago.
This is a really interesting thing that I was thinking about yesterday, actually, which is the benefits and the costs of running, what people would call like a B2C model rather than a B2B model. So business to customer rather than business to business. So traditionally, fashion is operated in the B2B space, where fashion designers create a collection, outsource production of it to either a production facility or outworkers who work in the community, or, a production facility overseas. And then they do it on the basis of pre-sales. So stores have already committed to buying, X number of units from their collection based on a sample collection. So they have, security of the fact that they know they're going to sell X units, therefore they go into production based off those orders. But the problem, of course, is cash flow. So sometimes the people who buy from you, so retailers will pay their invoices like up to 6 months after they've actually received the stock. Like, can you believe that? And you might have actually ordered production 6 months prior. Yeah. So that's like a totally bung business model. That just riles me up. But at the same time, it's really hard for retailers as well. So there's no point just blaming anyone. It's just a hard model.
It's just totally cooked.
Yeah. And then, but then, of course, and then the margins aren't very good, because you actually have to a lot of retailers take about 50% of the price of the garment. And so you're operating at such slow margins. That's why a lot of fashion businesses basically go under. And so, B2C or selling directly to customers is amazing because you're not squeezed in the same way you are with a retailer, but it means that you have to create a brand and invest so much in brand development to a crazy degree because you are solely responsible for, informing people about your brand and getting them onto your website to buy. There's no kind of fortuitousness about it at all. It's not like you go into a store and stumble upon it.
Yeah, you have to
you have to make every single sale.
You have to make every shop window that all of your retailers were making and every single customer connection.
Yeah, exactly. So it's so you do lose an amazing network when you have retailers. You've got a team of people who are out there selling your product, whereas when you're selling direct, it's just you, and that's beautiful because it means that we can completely tailor the customer experience, but it also makes you really vulnerable through time to very large swells in customer demand. So nothing's even about it at all, where it's a total boom or bust.
And so with your business model, that B2C part is through your website, and also you've just opened your first store, which is an amazing thing for creating those relationships with the customers. Do you have many stockists? Do you do those as well?
We've got a few around New Zealand, and we're actually about to try to get some more on board. But I think we view that more as a marketing exercise because we almost lose money through having other people stock our stuff. So yeah, the future is, I guess the dream though, is that you increase production. You basically can make more, which is good in itself because it means that we can provide more employment to people. So up to this point, we've been like really focusing on building the brand, and we feel like we've done that really well because we've got a really loyal following, people who love the product, and now it's just a question of volume. How can we get more retailers on board? How can we make more of what we're currently doing?
Tell me about the prices, because to me, with a bit of experience in making clothes in New Zealand, they look really good. They look very inexpensive, but still $36 for a pair of briefs versus literally dollars in a chain store for cotton briefs. I imagine quite a few people find it hard to understand why they cost what they do.
Yeah, we actually have had a few people really offended that we charge $36 for a pair of brief, and kind of adopt how could you do that thinking. But that's basically what it costs us to produce, and if we were to lower the price, we'd go out of business. So for us, it's we never set out to create we never, how can I say this, we feel to a certain extent like we don't have any choice. But at the same time, I'm actually really proud of our pricing because, you look at other lingerie companies that actually produce overseas, and if they're going for I guess more of a luxury demographic, they're charging between $50 and $100 for a pair of briefs that cost them probably a few dollars to make. And so our margins are really, really tight. But we passionately believe that we want to keep our prices as low as we can to make it as accessible for as many people as we can. But we just can't get it any lower than what we're doing right now without basically undermining everything we've built.
And without having a bit of margin, you get into this kind of arms race where the companies that do go overseas and make them for less but sell them for more then have more money to spend on building their brand and looking cool and looking good, which just builds their demand and makes yours harder to kind of justify, which is it's a really funny thing where as a country we've got all these laws around labour protection and environmental kind of discharge from printing facilities and all the rest of it, and then we just let people import things that are made in ways that we know are terrible. It's a pretty remarkable thing.
That's why we're really excited about opening our new shop with the workshop inside it, because we want to show people that a human hand was behind every single stitch on your garment. So I think, people are so focused on like tech innovation and how everything's becoming automated and our lives are becoming easier. And people assume that like if a t-shirt is $5, it's because a robot made it. Yeah, sure, everyone uses sewing machines, but a human has put every single line of stitching through a machine and has handled it and has maneuvered it and has sewn it. And I think we really, we just kind of assume that hasn't happened because it's so cheap, but I can assure you it absolutely has. And so we want to honor the people who have made our clothes that like protect us from the cold weather outside, make us look pretty, all of those things. We want to celebrate the skill that goes into creating a garment and show people what's actually involved. So we have about 10 industrial sewing machines in our workshop. So a cool thing is we want to say, your one pair of underwear involves about 8 of these machines and they each do different things. Most people think of their little domestic machine at home, but industrial production looks so different from that. And so we're really excited about saying, this is what it looks like to make a garment.
And so in your retail space, and what you just opened up in Willis Street in Wellington, the workroom is, you can see all the machines going. And is it through a window or is it on the shop floor?
No.
Or?
So for better or worse, I'm not sure if this is a wise decision yet, but so the workroom's actually like, there is no barrier. So it's just there. So you've got the shop and then you've got the workshop, and people kind of have to walk through the workshop to actually get to the shop.
Sorry, we've just lost you again with the sound there, Elisha.
I thought about putting up some barriers, but then I also thought, first and foremost, it's a workspace, and I didn't want people to be walking around these weird barriers. It's really nice to have a completely open floor plan so that people can move around the space as they want.
And a functioning workroom is a place where, there's a lot of enjoyment and a lot of feelings of progress when you're making things and people chatting. And I imagine that yours is especially interesting because, you've been so great at telling the stories of the people who work for you. And I love the thing you'd said that English is the only common language everyone has. So there's a lot of laughs and a lot of small misunderstandings a day that keep the day moving.
Oh, totally. It's very it happens all the time. And it also means that, things take longer to do because you can't assume anything. So, most Kiwis know about holiday pay at some basic level. Whereas for our employees, it's, you have to really be like, you're given 4 weeks of annual leave a year. This is what that looks like. If you take more than that, you won't get paid. You have to explain every single thing because you can't take anything for granted, and that just takes time, but it's also so worth it because it's the idea of someone being shut off from society or not really understanding what's going on with their own lives is just not an option.
And so now having how kind of 2 years-ish is it now that you've been going?
Well, so I was thinking about this the other day. We're having a launch party for our store on Thursday, and that's exactly 1 year from when we launched our website, like our online store 1 year ago. And then we started the workshop about 6 months before that. So it's about just a year and a half at this point.
Wow, that's so much in a year and a half.
Yeah.
And how does it feel like now that you've got to a stage where there is the regularness enough of custom to open a store and this is all happening? How does it feel now?
It feels really, it's probably not the best time for me to talk about it because it's really scary opening a store, especially in the age of where basically the general trend is for bricks and mortar to be dead, and shops are closing up left, right, and centre. And you think, oh God, if H&M can't do it, how can I? But I think we're offering something really different. So one reason I was really excited about having a workroom and a retail store in the same place is that we don't actually really need to hire retail staff. It will just be someone from the team who helps you. Someone will get up from their machine, I'll get off the computer or whatever, and we'll just chat together with customers and, come up with something that works for them. It's quite beautiful in a way, because it's just, there's no one sitting there twiddling their thumbs waiting for someone to enter the store. It's just us going about our business and then from time to time helping a customer. And it also brings the entire team into the customer service process, which I think will be amazing and give people a much greater understanding of who our customers are and how they feel about the garments.
And having a point of difference in the experience of the store, and the people who really care about it and can tell you the story because they do it is, that's the kind of retail that is thriving in the world, something that's so interesting.
Exactly. So it's going to be, we've had to, so on Saturdays, Nassim, one of our sewers, will be looking after the shop, and she'll be there for the whole day, and that she'll be just doing customer service on Saturday because the workshop won't be open. And she will have made the garments. Imagine trying on a bra and the person who's fitting you is actually the one that made it. That's pretty special.
Some of the skills as well that you've got in your workshop and that you're fostering, they're skills that were pretty much gone from New Zealand. And so, like underwear making, with underwire, it used to be with Bendon and Burley that there was this enormous local industry and so many talented sewers and so much knowledge. And then it all just went. And a couple of years ago, before you set up, it was nearly impossible to get an underwire bra done. It was nearly impossible to get swimwear made. And so you've actually like salvaged part of the industry. That's quite a remarkable thing, isn't it?
Yeah, it's funny though, because the really sad thing is that people think about businesses and the relationship with their customers as that being the main relationship, but actually for a business to thrive, the industry around that business needs to be really secure and thriving itself, because every business relies on thousands of suppliers and relationships themselves to generate their product. And so what I've definitely found is that, not many businesses could say this, but I think our business would have been a lot stronger if it had been around 20 years ago, because we now have to import a lot of stuff that once we could have purchased in New Zealand. So we're having to buy elastics at about 1.5 kilometers of elastic per color from Portugal. So you imagine we've got about 10 or 12 kilometers of elastic sitting in the workroom right now. And the reason is we have to deal directly with factories and buy at their minimum order quantities, because there's no middlemen to basically order things and then break it up between like 100 different users.
And although you save a margin, you've then got a kilometre of elastic to worry about and pay for.
Exactly. So that creates huge cash flow problems. But then I remember the day. It's really joyous days when I have to do new elastics orders, because that happened maybe 8 months ago. We had to reorder more of the elastics from the same supplier, and I'm like, we have used up 10 kilometers, 10,000 meters of elastic in about 7 or 8 months. I was like, that is insane.
Sorry, we've just lost you to the mute button, I think, again.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry. And you were saying we've just ordered 10,000 meters.
Yeah. So we'd ordered 10,000 meters. Oh, sorry. Yeah. What was I saying? So we'd gone through about 10,000 meters in about 7 or 8 months, and so to then need to reorder was a totally monumental thing. And I was like, this is absolutely insane. I thought we'd be going through this elastic for years to come. So we got there eventually, but it was the fact that the New Zealand industry has been absolutely decimated makes it so hard for other New Zealand manufacturers to stay in business. So hard. So I think honestly that one of the reasons for the domino effect has been that as soon as one supplier falls, or as soon as one production facility closes down, the people that used to work there then retrain into other industries. You lack the labor force basically goes away. And then also all of the parts you need become so much harder to source because you're having to get them in from overseas at really large quantities. So it's definitely an uphill battle for everyone who keeps their production in New Zealand because of those same factors.
And as you've mentioned, the knowledge of the market goes as well.
Yeah.
So people used to understand what went into making clothing, and now they just see it as, I could get that at Topshop for $50. And they've lost that relationship between the amount of work and the amount of care and the and the materials. And any time that things are cheap, they're cheap because either people aren't getting paid or there are government subsidies. And those are the only two options that you can have for underwear being $2 a go.
Totally. It's funny. I always think, I'm actually thinking maybe of starting up. Doing classes in the workshop, which are just like a make your own pair of underwear. Because I think people will quickly realize like the skill and expertise that goes into every single pair. I remember when I started to learn how to sew myself, I went to a little course and I thought to myself, oh, this will be great because it'll mean that I can make my own clothes and save a lot of money. To be honest, having learned how to sew, I am now so willing to spend $500 on a jacket and it had exactly the opposite effect. And in that now when I feel really expensive clothes, not that I can actually afford it, I can see why they are that price. I can see the level of thought and time that has gone into creating a really exquisite garment and all of the decisions they've made that make the garment much more expensive, but also increase the quality of it. And now that I know those things, I can't turn back. I can't unknow it. So it makes you really, and also, if you make a shirt or a t-shirt yourself, you realize that takes this home sewer like a few weeks to do. And so, and then you think, oh, let's say it takes maybe 15 hours or 10 hours in total. And then you're looking at something that you can buy for $5 and you think, oh man, that I know how long it takes to sew. I know. So it's definitely, I love this learning song for that reason, just giving you appreciation of time and quality of garments.
And you'd mentioned there that you can't afford it now. If you'd stuck in your law career, no problem at all. But a year and a half in, you've only just kind of started even paying yourself anything at all, haven't you? And
yes.
I guess I wonder what does success look like for you with the business? Like, where would you like to get it to, and what's the dream for it?
Yeah, my dream, I'm quite far away from this at the moment, but my dream is to be able to pay myself a market wage, ultimately to make myself replaceable, because as long as I am not doing that, no one would ever do what I'm currently doing, which makes the business itself not particularly resilient. So my focus is making the business strong enough to pay myself a market wage and to give everyone else a raise as well, so that in turn it makes it can just continue on for longer.
Yeah, and be a sustainable business in every sense of the word, not just organic cotton and
exactly.
fair work.
For it to be a sustainable business, every single part of it has to be replaceable, and that sounds really brutal. But as soon as at the moment, that's so far away from the case, and it means that if any part fails, the whole system falls down. And so that's definitely a scary place to be. So at the moment, I'm focusing on, like, my number one focus is resilience and making the business able to stand up to a few shocks.
And do you feel an extra sense of responsibility having crowdfunded? I mean, every business owner has this thing where they tell the community, I'm going to make a business work, and that's a huge responsibility, and they have employees, and that's a huge responsibility, and they have debts, and they have invested their time into it, and they want it to be a success. But in your case, you've crowdfunded, you've told the story, you've aligned yourself with it, you've got refugee workers who are higher needs that you've got a duty of care to in the instance. It must be a huge responsibility. It must be a hard thing to carry.
Not really, to be honest, because I feel like I'm doing my best every day. And there are so many things that are absolutely outside of my control, which ultimately determine the success of the business. So I can do as much as I can to build a strong database and, make a great product. But the forces of market demand and people's preferences are quite outside of my control. And that will ultimately be what determines the success of the business, how many people care about what we're trying to do and will give us an opportunity to wow them with an amazing product. We can't force people to do that. So that's really the ultimate deciding factor about what we go on to achieve, is whether enough people feel that and will give us that chance.
Well, that's so cool and such a great attitude. And thank you so much for sharing your story with us, Elisha Watson
worries.
of NISA.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Simon.
Hey, and if you are listening and you're finding yourself around Wellington, pop into their new space in Willis Street and check out the workroom and the store. And anywhere else listening around the world, you can jump on the website at nisa.co.nz. Thanks so much for joining us, Elisha.
Thank you.
Cool. Thank you very much, Tina, for producing, Tina Tiller, and thank you very much for listening, having us along in your ears. Cheers.
You've been listening to Business is Boring, presented by Simon Pound, and brought to you by the Spinoff and Callaghan Innovation.
From the Spinoff Podcast Network, that was Business is Boring, brought to you by SparkLab. Make sure you're following Business is Boring wherever you get your podcasts. And for more information on SparkLab, visit sparklab.co.nz. Ready to rediscover the joys of cycling? With over 300 kilometres of cycle paths across Tamaki Makaurau, jumping on your bike and going for a ride is such a fun way to discover the city from a different perspective. Cycling is getting more and more popular across Auckland, so now's a great time to join the hype and give cycling a go. Head to at.govt/cycling to find your nearest cycleway today. The Spinoff Podcast Network.